Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving into one of the most absolutely unbelievable and frankly tragic stories in all of human history. We're talking about a teenage king who literally held off an entire empire. He outmaneuvered cutthroat political rivals, all while his very own body was turning against him. Okay, let's get right into the story of King Baldwin IV of Jerusalem.
Just think about this for a second. Seriously, how do you rule a kingdom, hold off the absolute greatest military commander of your age, and keep all these power-hungry nobles in line, when your own body is literally eating you alive? It sounds like some dark fantasy novel, right? But it's completely real. Let's dive into this. To really understand this, I want you to picture something. Imagine you're just 9 years old. You're a prince, you're wrestling with the other boys out in the stone courtyard of a palace, and you're winning because, well, you always win. But your tutor, who's watching from a balcony up above, he isn't even looking at the fight. He's staring intently at your right arm. See, the other boys are scratching you, digging their nails really deep into your skin, and you don't even flinch. You don't feel a thing. And the chilling part is what happens next. That tutor calls the 9-year-old prince inside, pulls him aside, and takes a lit candle, pressing it right up close to the skin of his arm. And nothing. Absolutely no pain, no reaction whatsoever. The tutor's face just drains of color. It goes completely white. He knows exactly what this means, even if the young prince doesn't know it yet. Something inside this boy is going to eat him alive.
So 2 years pass, he's 11 now, and the terrifying reality sets in. A physician examines the boy in a dark room. He unwraps the linen, looks at that pale, numb skin, and presses a needle into his flesh. Still nothing. The doctor doesn't even need to say the word out loud. Leprosy. Now, in the 12th century, this diagnosis, it's a final, inescapable verdict. We're talking incurable physical deterioration, skin cracking, fingers curling inward like claws, and eventually, total blindness. Most people with this horrific disease are instantly cast out. They're forced to live in isolated colonies outside the city walls, ringing warning bells just so people know they're coming. But you see, this boy isn't most lepers. He is the heir to Jerusalem.
Fast forward just 2 years after that horrifying diagnosis. At the age of 13, the crushing weight of the crown falls squarely onto this sick boy's head. His father is suddenly taken by dysentery on a military campaign. So the barons of the realm kneel before a child. Now sure, some of them mean it, but let's be real, most are just calculating how they can use a dying boy to grab power. And look at what this 13-year-old is inheriting. It's a thin, incredibly fragile strip of land pressed right up against the Mediterranean Sea. You've got Egypt to the south, Syria to the east, and even worse, out in that desert, the most dangerous man alive, Saladin, is actively unifying the entire Muslim world under one single banner. Baldwin is quite literally the only thing standing between Saladin and the Holy City.
Okay, skip ahead just 3 years. Baldwin is 16. Suddenly, scouts ride in hard with some absolutely terrifying news. Saladin has crossed the border and is heading straight for Jerusalem. And he's bringing the largest army they have ever faced, 26,000 men. Baldwin's advisors are understandably completely panicking. They're begging this teenage king to just fall back, hide behind the thick stone walls of the city, and pray for reinforcements.
And the sheer desperation of this moment really comes down to the math. Against Saladin's 26,000 soldiers, Baldwin has a paltry force of exactly 375 knights, backed up by just a few thousand infantrymen. I mean, the math doesn't just look bad, the math is practically a death sentence. But here's where Baldwin shows who he really is. He completely defies his advisors. He refuses to hide. He decides they are going to ride out and meet this massive threat head-on. But there's a problem. The disease has already progressed so far that his right arm is severely weakening. He can barely grip the reins of his warhorse. It's such a visceral image. A servant literally has to strap the heavy wooden shield directly to the teenage king's arm, just because his fingers are too weak and numb to hold it. And with that strapped shield, he leads the charge toward a hill called Montgazard.
What happens next is literally the stuff of legend. Saladin's massive army is entirely unprepared. They think this young Leper King is just cowering behind his walls. Instead, Baldwin orders the charge. Those 375 knights slam into 26,000 soldiers with devastating, explosive impact. And Baldwin is right there in the middle of the chaos, a teenager with a failing body and a numb sword arm. Against all impossible odds, Saladin's army shatters. They scatter out into the desert in a total rout. The defeat is so absolute that Saladin himself barely escapes with his life, fleeing into the night on the back of a racing camel. For one brief, truly glorious night, the kingdom gets to celebrate, and the young king gets to forget that his clock is still ticking.
But by age 18, the contrast is just stark. The disease is aggressively accelerating now. His skin is cracking open, his right hand is nearly useless, and he literally has to be physically lifted onto his horse. But here's the catch. As his body rotted away, his mind remained razor sharp. He relied entirely on his immense mental fortitude to outmaneuver the incredibly ambitious barons that were swarming all around him.
And boy, did he need that mental sharpness. Because his own court was basically a nest of vipers. The vultures were circling everywhere. You had his own mother whispering in corners, scheming behind his back. You had his sister's new husband, a French knight who had way more ambition than actual skill, desperately trying to position himself for the crown. And all the barons? They were split into these entirely self-serving factions. So while Saladin was out in the desert, patiently rebuilding his forces, Baldwin had to watch his own kingdom try to tear itself apart from the inside out.
By the age of 20, the physical toll is just agonizing. His legs are giving out, he has to be carried into the throne room. And to hide his collapsing face, he wears a cold silver mask. He chose it himself, actually. He figured, hey, if the court is going to stare, let them stare at something cold and unreadable. But from behind that mask, his mind strikes. Remember that foolish French knight married to his sister? Well, the guy nearly started a war by stupidly raiding a merchant caravan during a hard-won truce with Saladin. So Baldwin uses his brilliant mind to publicly humiliate the man, completely stripping him of his authority and his claim to the throne.
Then, he strategically bypasses all the power-hungry men in his court. He doesn't pick someone flashy or ambitious. Instead, he appoints a solid, steady, deeply experienced lord from the northern territories to act as his regent. The court absolutely despises this move. They wanted the glamorous French knight. But Baldwin proves right here that he doesn't care about popularity in the slightest. He solely cares about the kingdom's survival.
And this brings us to a moment of just unbelievable defiance at age 21. Saladin invades again, and this time he's laying siege to a crumbling fortress near the Sea of Galilee. Baldwin's newly appointed regent gathers the army, but he's being too cautious. He refuses to attack while defenders are dying on the walls. Well, when Baldwin hears this, something inside him just snaps. He hasn't walked in months. His eyes are failing. Yet this bedridden king orders his servants to place him on a litter, a stretcher, and physically carry him to the front lines of the battlefield.
Imagine being there. The army sees their king arriving, not on a majestic war horse, but carried on a stretcher. He can't hold a sword, he can't grip reins, but his sheer presence alone rallies the entire desperate force. They march forward. And when Saladin sees the banners of Jerusalem approaching, and he knows that the broken Leper King is leading them, he withdraws. Without a single sword being swung, a blind king on a stretcher intimidates the most powerful warlord in the Middle East into turning around and walking away. It's incredible. But, the clock doesn't stop. By age 22, the light is entirely gone. Baldwin rules Jerusalem in total darkness. His body is completely unrecognizable, every single joint is swollen, and every breath he takes is pure agony. He relies on servants to describe rooms to him and read his letters out loud. Yet amazingly, he continues to dictate the complex fate of Jerusalem from a bed that he will never, ever leave. In these final days, he's desperately trying to build what is essentially a fragile sandcastle. He makes these very precise, calculated moves to protect the succession. Step 1. He names his sister's infant son as his co-king and heir. Step 2. He completely sidelines and bans that dangerous French knight from power forever. And step 3, he forces the divided, treacherous barons to swear their loyalty to the child, knowing full well some of them are lying right to his unseen face.
So why does all of this matter? What should we take away from these desperate final political moves? It's that Baldwin wasn't under any delusions. He knew he wasn't going to achieve some permanent magical victory over Saladin. His kingdom was a sandcastle, and Saladin was the rising tide. All Baldwin was doing, literally all he had ever done, was buying his people precious time. And he bought that time using his own blood, his own endless pain, and a body that frankly should have given out years ago.
And that brings us to the tragic finale of our timeline. At 23, the infant is crowned. At 24, after 11 agonizing years on the throne, the pain finally stops. King Baldwin IV passes away. But the bitter, heartbreaking irony of this whole story is what happens next.
Just 2 years later, when Baldwin would have been 26, that very same foolish French knight he spent his whole life trying to keep away from power somehow manages to take control. And almost immediately, that knight loses the entire kingdom to Saladin at the catastrophic Battle of the Horns of Hattin. Everything Baldwin fought for eventually fell.
But it didn't fall on his watch. He held the line when much stronger men would have simply surrendered in their sleep. I want to leave you with this incredibly powerful quote from our source material regarding his final moments. "You paid the price, and now you're a history." It leaves us with such a profound question. What is the ultimate cost of sheer willpower and duty? How far would you push a failing vessel if an entire kingdom rested on your shoulders? Thank you so much for exploring this incredible history with me in today's Explainer.